What's up, YouTube? Welcome to Ant Talk, the weekly comic conversation. I'm joined here with my guest, Zach.
What's up?
We just came from the theater and we saw the new horror movie, The Blair Witch. The Blair Witch is kind of like a direct sequel to the 1999 film, The Blair Witch Project, which is, I'd say at this point, a classic horror film. Original, especially during its time. It was one of the first movies to really use that found footage style. And the new one is basically, like I said, a direct sequel. It follows the main character, James, who is the brother of the main character, Heather, in the first movie. And this is 17 years later, and he's going out into the woods and he's trying to find her after he saw on the internet a video of what he thought was her in some found footage that was found in the woods. Anyways, Zach, tell me what you thought about The Blair Witch.
I liked it as a whole, like as a horror movie, but maybe not as much as an actual Blair Witch Project movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, this movie was actually, before it came out that it was The Blair Witch, this movie was titled The Woods. And do you think it should have stayed that way? I know that the story would have had to been changed a little bit, but...
Maybe, but calling it The Woods and trying to make it its own type of movie would be like, watching it would still be too much like the original Blair Witch feel to it.
Right, like the plot and everything.
So in a way, I kind of like that it's called Blair Witch.
Okay.
But, you know...
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
It's kind of confusing, but...
Right now, we're doing no spoilers, but we're going to get to spoilers in a second, so you'll be able to get into better detail and better explain things here soon. But me personally, I would say overall I liked it, enjoyed the film. It didn't blow me away. I thought it was actually a pretty decent sequel to what we got in '99, and I thought it expanded on what we didn't know about the Blair Witch, expanded on like the mythology and the lure. But at the same time, it didn't give us that much either.
Right. And
I thought that was kind of cool, but I feel like it was a lot of the same, but just up to another level, especially for this day and age. I think this style, the found footage style, has improved, and you could see how in the original film they just have like one like VHS recorder basically.
Right.
But nowadays you have all this different tech and these different cams and attachments so that the movie can be done better. You can split up scenes, like you can put characters in different areas and kind of go back and forth. What do you think about like that? Like, do you think that this found footage is improved over the years?
Oh yeah. I mean, like you said, it does make it more almost cinematic in a way, because you can see different scenes versus one, like from one perspective, the whole movie.
Yeah. I did seem to enjoy that more instead of just following the same camera throughout the whole movie. But I do think some of the in-betweens and the jumps like were a little much, because this movie does throw a lot. Like, before you get really going with the witch, it throws a lot of like fake jump scares at you, like characters are just like in each other's face and it's supposed to be like a startling moment, and I feel like it had too much of that.
I agree.
So overall, like I said, I enjoyed it. Was a good horror movie. I feel like it started off a little slow, but towards the end the tension really, like, once it picked up, it stayed for me. And you said overall you have some issues with it, but you do like it as a horror movie.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, those are our overall thoughts. So we're going to get into spoilers now and get into some a little bit more detail. So if you want to go check out The Blair Witch, I suggest you go do that before watching the rest of this video. So spoilers from here on out. So specifically, tell me what you did not like about this movie.
Honestly, there's a lot more than I would wish that I'd like, you know, but one of the things that like you were kind of touching on about the transitions is I feel like with these new technology, like the new technology that we have today with cameras, they don't necessarily do that like static,
right? That's
like
true.
glitchy thing that you see in the original, but that was 1999. This is 2016,
right. And there's a lot of noises.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's supposed to be just like to disorient the audience into being like scared.
Like, like I get it for like a horror movie like aspect, but if it's basically the way I perceive the Blair Witch is that it's supposed to give you a real feel, like you it's supposed to feel like this is actually found footage,
right?
Versus like just a horror movie,
right?
And I feel like that was one maybe unrealistic in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Because the first movie to me did a lot better job feeling like, granted I was a kid still when it came out, but I felt like when I first saw it, I'm like, is this real?
Right.
Like, is this something like out there for real? Is there really a Blair Witch? But obviously I grew up, and learned a little bit. But this movie, I don't feel like it would have that effect on an 8-year-old me if I saw it, and I wouldn't say, oh, is this really happening to these people out in the woods? Right. It does seem more like a movie. But for what it's worth, I think it did do a good job. Like, that style of found footage is being like perfected.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I do agree with what you said. There's a lot more characters. What did you think about the acting and the actors' performances?
I thought actual performance-wise was like pretty good, especially towards the end. But there was a lot of cliche like moments for me that kind of like it took away from the scare for me. Like I was almost kind of thought it was funny. Yeah. Oh yeah. I say the first third of this movie was almost more of a comedy because the character Peter, he had a lot of like funny moments, or at least was supposed to be funny. So like I said earlier, this movie, it starts off following James, who is the brother of Heather, who got lost in the Black Hill Forest in the first movie. So he takes his best friend Peter and his girlfriend Ashley, and they get their friend Lisa, who is kind of like their camera girl, basically. She's got all the equipment and all that. So they find on YouTube this video of the haunted house where the Blair Witch supposedly is, and where supposedly Heather gets lost, and it's all in the footage from the first film. So they see a YouTube video of this house, and he sees in the reflection of a mirror who he thinks is Heather, his sister. So he wants to go find out. So he tracks down who came out with this video, Lane and his girlfriend Talia, and they live near the Black Hills Forest where all this goes down. They are willing to show where they found this tape. So they get out there into Black Hills Forest and they set up camp, and that's when this whole thing starts. Now, it starts off the first night, not much happens. They try to scare, with some noises or whatnot, but not much happens. And they wake up to the stick figurines, who come to find out it was really Lane and his girlfriend. Or they're ready to call this whole thing off like it's BS, but then they can't find their way back to the car. And that's when this movie really starts taking off for me. Like I said, I think it kind of started off a little slow. I agree. I mean, there was some stuff though that had like enough comedy in it to kind of keep you satisfied. Like you weren't too bored with the beginning.
Right, that's true.
But for it being what it's supposed to be, it did kind of drag on. Yeah.
Right, like it took a while to introduce the characters, and it's like, okay, let's scare the shit out of these kids. But so after they find out Lane and his girlfriend set them up to scare them with the fake twig figurines, they split up and they end up back at the campsite. Now, this is where you have a lot of elements from the original movie come back into play, but there's definitely some new ones. And they definitely expand on the lure. What do you think about that? Like, do you like where the little bit more information we got on the Blair Witch?
You know, like, I think some of it was kind of new, but at the same time, a lot of it did remind me of what was in the beginning of the original, too, because they were interviewing a lot of people that were telling stories, too. And some of them were kind of similar. They just added a little more detail to it in this one. But, like you said, how they kind of go in a circle, like, they end up back at their campground. That was a lot like the first one, too, how they kept going in circles. Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I thought was a new element is when, like I said, they get split up from Lane and Talia, and while they're at the campsite at night 2, Talia and Lane come out of the woods, and they kind of run into each other again, and he asks, like, when's the last time you saw me? And they say, earlier this afternoon. And he's like, it's been 5 days since I saw it, you know, and they look a mess. And I thought that was kind of cool.
I agree. That was pretty sweet.
It just, like, it's just weird because it doesn't make sense. And I think part of the key to this Blair Witch franchise is the ambiguity and not really knowing, you know, the definitive facts about what's going on.
Messes with your mind a little bit.
Right. The scares, they start piling on, more and more starts happening. The group gets split up. They start dropping.
One thing I noticed that was pretty, like, consistent throughout the movie that I noticed that I still don't understand why it was happening, but there was a lot of, like, trees falling.
Right.
Like, even when it wasn't storming or anything, like it was supposedly supposed to be the witch or whatever, there was, I don't know how many trees always falling, either on somebody or towards somebody, or just hearing it in the background. I feel like it was more there to try to give you that jump scare because of the loud noise of it, in a way.
I think, again, like I said earlier, this movie throws a lot of, like, scares at you, jump scares and noises and, you know, disorientation, and, you know, I feel like it's over jam-packed with that. I feel like, I know you got some issues with the third act, and we'll get into that, but I do feel like once the tension is there towards the third act, it does a good job with that. But before that, when it's just kind of starting off and getting going, it's a lot of pointless, like, you know, they just turn and right into somebody else's face. And it's like, it happens, like, over and over. And
like, who does that? Like, and, hey, man.
In the middle of the woods, in the dark, when you're already scared. And like the original movie, they wake up to a lot of those stick figures hanging from the tree again a lot. But a little new element was the character Ashley breaks one in half, and it, like a voodoo spell, it breaks Talia in half and kills her.
Yeah, because the stick figure doll, like voodoo doll or whatever, had her hair in it.
That's right, yeah.
So it's like, you know, it was made, like, so whatever happens to that happens to her.
Yeah, so that was a little newer. It comes down to just James and Lisa, and they're running, and finally they run into the house they've been searching for all this time, the one from the original movie where Heather and her friends were last seen in the footage. Now this is where you start to have issues with the witch, right?
Yes, I did.
Now, what didn't you like about the witch?
For one, when I was watching it, I felt like that wasn't a witch. To me, I got the vibe of just a monster creature thing. Like, I didn't even know if it was supposed to be the witch.
Right. To me, it looked kind of like the offspring of, like, Gollum and Slender Man.
And one thing that I will say for sure is that the scene when she is running down the hallway being chased by this monster was, like, straight out of Hellraiser.
Okay.
There is a monster in Hellraiser that is very similar in a way. Like, it's not as, like, thin as the Blair Witch one was, but it's, like, the same lengthy creature and, like, skin tone and, like, the baldness and all that was, like, straight out of Hellraiser. And even the look of the hallway in the house with, like, the way the lighting comes through the window, everything was just Hellraiser to me. And it didn't even feel like a Blair Witch movie to me at that point.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it definitely changed in the field. Like, I didn't expect to really get a actual visual of the Blair Witch, which, you know, you're watching the movie and you want to see the, you know, what does this entity look like. When you finally do see it, you know, I feel like you're not as satisfied.
Yeah, it was kind of disappointing for me, honestly. And one thing that I was kind of thinking going into the movie was, I hope they don't show the witch, because that's kind of what made the first one good in a way, because it left that mystery, like, what the hell, like you said, what the hell is this thing? But if they did, like they did show it, I wish it just would have been different. Right. You know?
Mm-hmm. I do kind of like that this movie walked and went around the house a little more. It explored the house a little more. I was afraid it was going to almost end exactly like the original.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I did like that.
Right.
Of it. Like, that part of it, but...
There's things I liked and didn't like about that when they get in the house.
Right.
Like, the giant, like, light shining through from the outside through all the cracks in the house.
Yeah, that threw me completely off, because it almost switched in my mind from a, like, Blair Witch, like, in the woods, like, monster type movie to, like, an alien movie.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, is that a UFO? Like,
yeah,
what is that?
It made no sense to... there's nothing about that really connects it to anything prior that we know of with the witch before.
It just leaves, and they never touch on it ever again in the movie. It was kind of pointless.
Right. I'd say what I kind of liked about this is once they follow Lisa through the house, she goes down to the basement, and everybody in the theater is like, don't you do it. But she does. And she runs into Lane again. And Lane's got a full beard this time, as if he's been running around this woods for weeks.
Right.
When they're only on their... You know, the sun never came up, so I think we're supposed to assume they were, like, in their third day. Yeah, so she runs into Lane in the basement, and he knocks her out and throws her in a cellar and locks it.
Yep.
Not really explaining why. He just yells, like, we have to do what she says.
Yeah.
Or something. And it's a mystery, and it's like one I kind of wish I had answered, but, you know, I guess we'll, you know, have to live with what we got. But when she gets locked in that cellar, she finds, like, that tunnel through, like, basically through the earth, and that's her only way out, and she starts going that way, and there's a point where she gets stuck.
Yep.
And I think that was almost the scariest part of the movie for me. Like,
I did like that they threw that in there, because, like, the movie as a whole kind of touched on, like, each kind of person's fear, you know. They got the claustrophobic, like, for the underground, like, imagine somebody who has serious claustrophobia and just being stuck underground.
Yeah. I don't even have it that bad, but I had it, like, watching that scene.
That'd be terrifying.
But she gets out, and she gets upstairs and finds James, who's been looking all around the house for his sister Heather, who he thought he saw. And as Lisa's running up the stairs, she passes by a mirror, and we get the same image that's in the YouTube video from the beginning of the movie. To me, it doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
But, I mean, it's almost cool.
Oh yeah, like, I agree. Like, it was a cool, like, twist on it, but it still leaves you with, like, how's that even possible?
Right.
Because they watch the video on YouTube before they even go to the woods, but it's of them in the woods already.
Right. What I don't get is how this video gets on YouTube. If they are in this continuous loop.
Right.
Like, how does that... It doesn't... I don't know, unless Lane is still walking around. But didn't she killed him, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Stabbed him in the neck.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I forgot to mention earlier, but it's some rules basically on the witch. You can't look her in the eyes because she's looking for a sacrifice, basically. And if you look her in the eyes, she takes you. So the trick is to stand in the corner and not look at her. So James and Lisa, when the witch arrives, they turn into the corner and they don't look. But they get James because James thinks his sister is present. So he turns around to see, and just like that, it's like Medusa, basically.
Right.
Except for instead of turning into stone,
You just get your ass snatched.
yeah,
basically.
by the witch.
Right.
And she doesn't do it. Lisa doesn't do it. And then she does something smart, uses her camera to look behind her and walk her way out of the house. But then she hears James' voice and turns around.
Yeah.
We assume she dies, and she drops the camera in a very, very similar way to the first movie.
Yep.
Which I personally did not like the ending.
Yeah, I kind of wish they would have done something more unique or new that we hadn't seen in the first one. You know, it's almost identical.
Right. Not only is it just like the first movie's ending, but I thought Lisa, she did a good job from when she got into the house. It seemed like she had to really like work her way through from getting stuck in the hole. You know, having to kill Lane, having to find James, and you know, learn how to avoid the witch. And she does that. She finds a way to get out of the house without looking, and she just does it all the way at the end. And I thought it was kind of like a cop out for the filmmakers, but like I wanted to see her get out. I felt like her character deserved to get out,
Right.
and I thought it would have been cool to see what happens when you survive the Blair Witch.
Yeah, I would have liked to see something like that too. That would have been, you know, it would have gave this movie more of, like you said, like how they keep adding. Like they took the first movie and pretty much took it to the next level.
Right.
And I feel like that would have taken this movie to the next level again for the ending.
Right.
Versus going back to square one, you know.
So, that's about it from me. Anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
I was kind of mad that she had that knife the whole time and didn't use it until the end.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she could have used that when she was stuck in the tunnel to, like, dig at the dirt or something, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
She did not even use it until, like, she got to that point where she stabs him in the neck.
That's a good point. Very good point. So, overall, like I said, I enjoyed it. When the suspense was high, it was high, and I was engaged. But, you know, this movie didn't blow me away. It did have some flaws, but I thought it was a pretty decent sequel to the first movie.
I will say this. I definitely liked this movie, The Blair Witch, more than The Blair Witch Project 2, Book of Shadows, or whatever. Like, that movie, that doesn't even exist to me.
I still haven't seen it. I don't need to see it.
You don't.
This is... The Blair Witch is Blair Witch 2, if you ask me.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, I did enjoy it overall. I would recommend going to see it if you're a horror fan. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Well, that's our review of The Blair Witch. This is Ant Talk, the weekly comic conversation. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya.